You ever watch a man in his late 40s pour a drink at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, help his daughter with her algebra at 5, take a call from his mama's nursing home at 6, and then sit in his truck in the driveway at 9 just to get 10 minutes of quiet before he walks in his own house? You know that man. You might be that man. Folks call him grown. They call him solid. They call him the one who handles it. Nobody calls him tired, because he won't say it. I'm Franklin, and today we're talking about a very specific stretch of black men nobody really studies on purpose. The brothers born between 1973 and 1980. The late GenX cats. Not the older Gen X who remember Reagan getting elected. Not the millennials who remember 9/11 in middle school. The ones in between. The ones who turned 5 right when crack hit, turned 10 when the bodies started piling up, and turned 16 when the federal prison population had already multiplied several times over. The ones who learned how to be men in one of the loudest, most violent, most surveilled stretches of modern black American life, and then grew up and got handed the bill for all of it. The drinking, the silence, the overfunctioning, the suspicion of every doctor in every form. A lot of it traces back to a window of time most people don't even know was a window. Let me start with what these men are actually doing right now, because the behavior is the receipt. Researchers at Ohio State led by Hui Zhang ran a national study on generational health, and they found something most people missed in the headlines. Heavy drinking and street drug use have been climbing across generations, and the study flagged late Gen X and early millennial black men as a group where those numbers stand out. Born roughly 1973 to 1980 on the Gen X side, that's a group whose drinking probability climbed and whose street drug use ticked back up after years of decline. Now, if you stop right there, you get the lazy version of the story. Black men in their late 40s, drinking more, doing more, dying earlier. That's the version that ends up in a think piece somebody's nephew shares on LinkedIn. But the full story is why this exact birth window. What happened to a 5-year-old in 1980 that didn't happen to a 15-year-old in 1980? What hit a 10-year-old in 1985 that the kid born in 1965 had already aged out of? Here's where it gets specific. In the late 1980s, the homicide rate for young black males in their teens climbed sharply, more than doubling in a handful of years. The kids born 1973 to 1980 were between 4 and 16 years old during that window. So picture the math. If you were born in 1975, you were 9 when the killing started climbing and a teenager when it peaked. You didn't read about the crack era. You lived inside it as a child. Your cousins were the statistics. Your block was the data set. Your elementary school had assemblies about it. And while that was happening to you on the ground, the federal government was busy making it permanent on paper. Georgetown's O'Neill Institute laid out the receipts. The 1986 sentencing law created a 100-to-1 ratio between crack and powder cocaine. 5 grams of crack got you the same mandatory minimum as 500 grams of powder. About 80% of the people charged with crack offenses in federal court were black. The federal prison population for nonviolent drug offenses went from around 50,000 in 1980 to roughly 400,000 by 1997. So when you were in 3rd grade learning cursive, Congress was writing the law that would empty out parts of your neighborhood by the time you graduated high school. And then look at who got caught in it. A study published through the National Institutes of Health tracked the lifetime risk of going to prison by birth year. For black men born 1965 to 1969, the older Gen X, about 22% could expect to serve time. For black men born around 1981, the millennials right behind our group, the lifetime risk climbed to about 1 in 3. The 1973 to 1980 cohort sits right on the slope between those two numbers, going up. The reason wasn't a new decision to lock more people up. The laws written when you were a kid started biting when you became a teenager. So now you understand the floor these brothers were standing on when they became men. Crack at the door, homicide at the corner, federal sentencing in the air, and a country that had decided the answer to all of it was cages. You still
with me? Good. Because here's where it gets interesting. This same cohort, the one the data says is drinking more and using more, is also, statistically, one of the most involved parenting groups in the country. And almost nobody talks about that out loud. The CDC ran a national health statistics report that Newsweek wrote up a few years back. They looked at fathers who lived with their kids and asked who was doing the daily care: bathing, dressing, diapering, helping with the bathroom. Around 70% of black fathers said they did that every single day. About 60% of white fathers. About 45% of Hispanic fathers. Black fathers were the highest group in the country on daily hands-on care. The absent black father story is a story. The data tells a different one. And it gets sharper.
A peer-reviewed study by Jay Fagan in the Journal of Family Issues looked specifically at low-income black fathers, the group the stereotype was built around. Resident, non-resident, didn't matter. They were no less involved with their children than fathers of any other racial group. So what does that mean for the man we're talking about? The brother born in 1976? It means he's drinking on Tuesday and helping with algebra on Tuesday. Both things. He's the one who showed up. He's the one who decided whatever happened in his house growing up, whether his daddy was there or wasn't, whether his daddy was working 3 jobs or locked up or just checked out, he was going to be different. And he is. He just doesn't get a parade for it. He gets a Newsweek headline every 5 years saying the myth isn't real, and then everybody goes back to acting like it is. And here's the part nobody connects. The overfunctioning at home is part of the same nervous system that produces the drinking. You don't get one without the other in a lot of these men. The vigilance that makes you a present father is the same vigilance that won't let you sit still on a Saturday. The control that keeps you sober at your kid's recital is the same control that needs 2 drinks to come down off at night. The job that lets you afford the house is the same job that's been telling you for 20 years that you're lucky to have it. Speaking of the job, let me talk about the money, because this is where the story gets really uncomfortable. The Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis put out a report in 2024 on the income gap for black workers. They looked at W-2 earnings, actual paychecks, not surveys. In 2019, the median black man was earning about 62% of what the median white man was earning, 62 cents on the dollar. And the gap between 2009 and 2019 actually got wider at most income levels. Black men were the only male group in the country whose earnings fell relative to white men over that decade. Not stayed flat, fell. Now think about who was working through that decade. The 1973 to 1980 cohort. The brothers who were 29 to 36 years old in 2009 and 39 to 46 in 2019. The prime earning years of their lives. The years when other groups were compounding raises, building equity, getting promotions. This group was watching their relative position get worse. The reason wasn't laziness. The structure of work in America shifted, and they were the ones holding the short end. And while that was happening, something else was happening at the same time, and this is where you start to feel the weight on the man's shoulders. A study using the CDC's Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System found that roughly 31% of GenX are sandwich generation caregivers. That means they're taking care of a parent and a child at the same time, compared to about 6% of baby boomers, 5 times the rate. And the same study found GenX caregivers report higher mental distress than the boomer caregivers did. More anxiety, more frequent bad mental health days. So the man born in 1976 is paying for his kids' braces and his mama's blood pressure pills out of the same check. The check that's been losing ground for 10 years. And nobody asks him how he's doing. Because he's the one who handles it. You see how the picture starts to fill in? You see why the drinking is going up? Now here's the thing. You'd think a man under that much pressure would go talk to somebody, get a therapist, get on a medication, get into a men's group, something. He doesn't. And the research says he doesn't, in numbers. A 2023 study by Coleman Karumba and her colleagues looked at black men and mental health help seeking. Black men seek mental health care at significantly lower rates than white adults. The drivers they found were the things you already know if you grew up around these men. Self-reliance, emotional control, the idea that asking for help is what other people do. And it gets deeper. Research out of the National Survey of American Life found that black men can have lower diagnosed rates of some anxiety and mood disorders than some other groups. But when they do have one, the chronicity is higher, it lasts longer, and the treatment utilization is lower. The difference is duration. They carry it longer and get less help when they finally name it. Put that together. A man who came up under crack era violence, watched the federal system gear up to swallow his cohort, hit his earning years and watched the gap widen, picked up his mama's care and his kids' care at the same time, and learned from everything around him that the move is to handle it yourself. That's the man drinking on Tuesday. Call it what it is, a logical conclusion to a 30-year setup. Now let me give you the cultural piece, because this one doesn't get talked about, and it matters. There's a scholar named Bakari Kitwana and another one named Pero Dagbovi who write about what they call the hip-hop generation, and they split it. The older cut, black folks born roughly 1965 to the mid-1970s, came up inside what people sometimes call nation-conscious rap, Public Enemy, KRS-One, X-Clan, rap that was teaching black history while it was rhyming. The younger cut, born late 1970s into the early 1980s, came of age after that wave broke. They came up in the gangster rap era, Death Row, No Limit, the shiny suit years. JSTOR Daily summarized this work and described a documented gap in historical consciousness between the older and younger ends of that generation. I'm not here to argue one era of music was better than another. That's a different video. The point is this. The man born in 1968 got his history lessons from Chuck D when he was 15. The man born in 1978 got his worldview from a different set of records when he was 15. Same neighborhood, same parents sometimes, different curriculum on the radio. And it shows up later in life in how the two men interpret what happened to them. The older brother is more likely to frame his life as a political condition. The younger one is more likely to frame it as a personal hustle that didn't pay off. Same conditions, two different mirrors. That matters because the way you tell the story of your own life determines what you do with the pain. If your pain is a political condition, you might organize, you might write, you might call somebody. If your pain is just your personal hustle not paying off, you sit with it alone and you pour a drink. So now stack it all together one more time because I want you to see the man whole. He's between 44 and 51 years old right now. He was a small child during the worst of the crack violence. He was a teenager when the federal prison machine got built around his cohort. He came into the workforce just in time for the gap to widen against him. He's raising his kids more hands-on than the stereotype says. He's taking care of his mama. He's drinking more than the generations before him. He avoids therapy. And the cultural language he was handed at 15 taught him to read his pain as a personal story rather than a structural one. Call him what he is, a man carrying the bill for choices made by people who never met him, with tools that were handed to him by accident, in a culture that told him the right answer was to handle it. And here is what I want you to do with this, because I'm not in the business of just laying out the autopsy. If you're that man, the first move isn't a self-help book. The first move is just naming the window you came up in. Not as an excuse, as context. The drinking is a coping tool that worked for a long time and is now starting to charge interest. The avoidance of doctors is a learned response to institutions that have a documented history of treating your cohort like a problem to be managed. The overfunctioning at home is one of the most quietly heroic stories in American family life that does not get a single magazine cover. Now, none of that means you keep doing it the same way for the next 20 years. The sandwich generation data is clear. The men carrying both ends are not winning the carrying. They're getting sicker doing it. So the work, if you're going to do any work, is the work of letting one or two things go. Telling one person the truth about what your week actually looks like. Going to one appointment you've been putting off. Don't do it because somebody on the internet told you to. Do it because the math on your body and the math on your time both ran out about 2 years ago and you know it. If you love a man like that, the move is even simpler. Stop asking him if he's all right. He's going to say he's good. He has been saying he's good since 1987. Ask him something specific. Ask him when's the last time he took a day for himself. Ask him who calls him to check on him. Ask him what he's been drinking lately and how often. Not as an attack, as a witness. Because part of what these men never got, in any of the windows we just walked through, was the experience of somebody seeing the full load and saying it out loud back to them. Just naming it. Just saying, I see what you're carrying. That's the whole thing. The drinking, the silence, the parenting, the working, the carrying, the not asking. None of it is random. None of it is a character flaw. It's a generation of men who got handed a specific window of American life and learned to survive it the only way they were taught. And most of them are still here, which, given what they walked through, is its own kind of miracle. Appreciate you sitting with me on this one. There's another video right there on the screen. Go on and check it out.